Folks, hello and welcome to Tavern Chat. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Ten Cars Tavern blog. James Raggie, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, put up what I think is a spectacular video entitled The Arrogance and Foolishness of Inclusive Language. I don't know if that really does the subject matter justice, but it's certainly an excellent video. Like James or not, and I know there's a number of people who probably watch my videos that don't much care for James. James is very smart. He thinks his arguments out. Um, he doesn't just shoot from the hip. So this is actually something that he wrote. Now I'm just gonna take it's a 52-minute video. And I just want to highlight a small piece of that and comment on it because I think James is literally that spot on. If you have the time, you should watch the whole video. Not just, I'll include a link in the show notes, I'll include a link as a pinned comment, but you really should go to James and watch this.
But I don't really know anymore. I mean, it seems to some that the proper use of language isn't to describe or communicate meaning or express what one thinks or feels, but that the purpose of language is to shape the world. But perception is not reality.
Well, think about that. So, the use of language is not to describe the world. The language is not meant to basically tell truth. It's meant to shape the world. It's meant to be changed in the image, I guess, of whoever is using the language. Let's listen to more of James.
Changing the label on a thing doesn't change the actual thing. The pretense that language shapes reality, I mean, you can get people to believe it. It can change perception.
It can change perception. So you can change language however you want, and you might change the perception, but you're not going to change reality. You can take the reference to slavery out of gaming books. It doesn't mean that slavery still doesn't exist in these days, this world, heck, even in the US. All right? It still exists. By removing the language from certain, I don't know, communities, it doesn't mean that the situation is something that no longer exists or never did exist, right?
And we all euphemize to whatever degree, but in the end, these things are lies. If how we think and communicate about reality doesn't match what reality is, it doesn't change reality. It
Good point. But it's an attempt to change the perception of reality.
just makes us unable to deal with it. But why this push to sanitize fiction and storytelling? What do we, as a hobby, as an industry, as a society, as a culture, gain from doing this?
And James is going to have some very good points. And remember, role playing games, the role is ROLE. And yes, we will joke, oh, it could also mean roll because we're rolling dice. Yeah. And if you play in certain groups, like when I ran Swords and Wizardry for 5e players, there was one player who insisted there had to be a roll for, oh, I don't believe them. I want to roll detect lie, or I need to roll my intimidation. And it's like, well, no, just role play it. Well, no, I need to roll. No, play it out. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you want to do. Right? An active role playing game, and this is not, in my mind, storytelling, but an active role playing game a story develops from the actions of the players and the random dice and all this stuff and the DM's input, and you get a story that builds from that. That's why D&D players tell stories of whatever encounter was run 25 years ago, because in their mind that's more memorable than reading The Hobbit. And it really, in their mind, is a vision of what happened. That meant that as a group, they told an entertaining story.
I don't understand. I mean, the purpose of fiction is not to model morality. The purpose of fiction is not wish fulfillment.
Now, some people are going to say, oh, well, fiction should model morality. And some fiction can. But that's not the point of fiction. That's not the point of, I mean, how many romance novels are some of the most popular novels out there? They're certainly not uh, modeling morality.
The purpose of fiction is not to be a power fantasy. The purpose of fiction is not to reinforce societal taboos. The purpose of fiction is not to validate your view of the world.
The purpose of fiction is, generally speaking, and James will go on about this, but in my, it's to tell a story and to get your audience engaged. Um, I took creative writing back in college, and I'm gonna late '80s, I guess. So wow, a while back. And the professor at the time, Professor Titel, said, if you write only for yourself, if you write what you believe the world should want, you are engaging in mental masturbation. You have to be an entertainer. You have to engage your audience. Writing is not something that's just meant to make you feel good. But there are some people that it's a tool for that. But if you are, but then that's it. That's basically that's it. Mental masturbation. If you're writing something, whether it's a game, whether it's fiction, oh, even if it's an autobiography, you're trying to engage your audience. If you're not making it interesting, and if you aren't using language to the best of its capability, you probably aren't making it interesting. You're not going to keep your audience engaged. You are engaging in some form of mental masturbation.
The purpose of fiction is not to validate you as a person. The purpose of fiction is not to make you feel good. The purpose of fiction is not to make you feel safe.
Again, all these things that James is discussing is fiction. If you are writing it for an audience of one, be at it. But even RPGs aren't an audience of one, right? It's an audience of 5 or 6 per group, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but there's a purpose to it. And you do a disservice to that purpose when you limit things.
There is a word for people who expect these things from fiction, and there is a word for the target audience of fiction that does all of this: children. Actually, someone that I showed a draft of this text to, that has a child, pointed out that I am undervalidating and under-evaluating the capacity of children to process stories. So, okay, fine, not children, babies. So let's talk about language in Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games in general. It's my experience that, at least from the late 70s on, the Dungeons and Dragons was communicated player to player. There was an assumption of a common canon of fantasy literature.
Which Jane doesn't address, but I think some of that change has because of the internet, right? When you were younger, your access to books, if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, was physical books. You didn't have access to Kindle or order something right away. And you borrowed books from people. I don't think I borrowed a book from somebody in over 20 years. So that's part of the change in culture, and everybody passed around. I was the library in my ninth grade junior high school class because I had the different Moorcock and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and the Lord of the Rings and whatever else. I was starting to check out other fantasy stuff, and people come to me to borrow books after I read them because there was this idea that you would be able to talk about it. I don't see that anymore. But I don't want to give up the rest of James's video. It's solid. It's good. If you know James, it's 100% James. I think you should maybe watch it in two pieces. Okay, it's 52 minutes. Some people might find that long, but James does a great job, and I just figured he needed to get a little extra eyes on. That's a point to this little coverage that I just did. So, folks, tomorrow, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but we will have another video tomorrow. Wednesday's the next live stream. Oh, tomorrow on the blog side at 10carstavern.com, we kick off OSR Christmas. There's going to be giveaways. There'll be giveaways this Wednesday at 8 p.m. on our live stream. We're looking to give away a lot of stuff. So join us. But tomorrow, 10carstavern.com. That blog post will go up probably in the afternoon. Should be live for at least 48 hours. And all you got to do is you got to comment and tell me if you're in the States or outside the States, because depending on what is being gifted, depends on what gifts are available. All right, folks, on that note, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice, roll them well. I will be back again tomorrow. There's some less deaths. All right.